The yellow school bus rumbled through the early morning streets of Riverside Elementary's district, its familiar diesel engine creating a steady rhythm that had become as routine as breathing for most passengers. 8-year-old Maya Johnson pressed her small face against the cool window, watching the suburban houses blur past in shades of beige and white. Her backpack, decorated with bright butterflies and slightly worn at the corners, sat snugly against her lap as she mentally prepared for another day of third grade. Maya had always been observant for her age. While other children chattered excitedly about playground games or weekend adventures, she noticed things. The way Mrs. Peterson next door always watered her roses at exactly 7:30, how the traffic light at Maple Street flickered just before turning green, and today, something different about Mr. Henderson, their usual bus driver. His normally cheerful demeanor seemed strained, his knuckles white against the steering wheel, and he kept glancing nervously at his rearview mirror in a way that made Maya's stomach flutter with unease. The bus was particularly crowded that Tuesday morning, filled with the usual mix of elementary and middle school students. Maya sat toward the front, just 3 rows behind Mr. Henderson, a position that typically made her feel safe and secure. She had ridden this same route for 2 years now, and the predictable routine brought comfort to her young world. But today felt different. Today the air seemed heavy, with an tension she couldn't quite name, and Mr. Henderson's usually warm greeting had been replaced by a distracted nod that barely acknowledged her presence. Before we continue, tell us where you're listening from today in the comments below. If you enjoy stories with unexpected twists and moments of justice, please consider subscribing. As the bus made its way through the residential neighborhoods, Maya noticed they were taking a different route. Instead of the familiar left turn onto Oakwood Avenue that would lead directly to school, Mr. Henderson had continued straight, heading toward the industrial part of town where her mother had once pointed out the old warehouses and abandoned buildings. Maya's heart began to beat faster. She raised her small hand tentatively. "Mr. Henderson?" she called out, her voice barely audible over the engine noise and student chatter. "I think we're going the wrong way." The bus driver's eyes met hers in the rear-view mirror for just a moment, but instead of the reassuring smile she expected, his expression was cold, almost angry. He said nothing and continued driving, his jaw set in a way that made Maya shrink back into her seat. Around her, the other children seemed oblivious to the change in route, caught up in their own conversations and morning rituals. Maya tried again, this time a little louder. "Mr. Henderson, this isn't the way to school." Several other students began to notice now, their conversations quieting as they looked around with growing confusion. The familiar landmarks were nowhere to be seen, replaced by chain-link fences and empty lots that stretched endlessly under the gray morning sky. "We're taking a shortcut," Mr. Henderson finally replied, his voice sharp and final in a way that discouraged further questions. But Maya knew this wasn't true. She had lived in this town her entire life, and there was no shortcut through the industrial district that would get them to Riverside Elementary faster. If anything, this route would add at least 15 minutes to their journey, and they were already running behind schedule. The other children began to murmur among themselves, sensing the shift in atmosphere. 10-year-old Marcus from 5th grade stood up slightly, peering out the front windshield. "Hey, where are we going?" he asked, his voice carrying the authority that came with being one of the older kids on the bus. Mr. Henderson's response was swift and harsh. "Sit down and be quiet," he barked, his tone so unlike his usual gentle demeanor that several younger children visibly flinched. "I'm the adult here, and I know where I'm going." Maya felt a chill run down her spine that had nothing to do with the morning air. In all her years of riding this bus, she had never heard Mr. Henderson raise his voice or speak to them with such obvious irritation. Something was very wrong, and with each passing minute, they were getting further away from school, further away from safety, and deeper into a part of town where no school bus had any reason to be. The industrial buildings grew taller around them, casting long shadows across the bus's interior. Maya clutched her backpack tighter and made a decision that would change everything. Quietly, carefully, she reached into the front pocket of her bag where her mother had placed an old cell phone for emergencies only. Her small fingers found the familiar shape, and she pulled it out just enough to see the screen, keeping it hidden beneath her butterfly backpack. The weight of the phone in Maya's hands felt heavier than it should have, as if the device understood the gravity of what she was about to do. Her mother's voice echoed in her memory from the day she had given her the phone 6 months earlier. "This is only for real emergencies, baby girl. Not for calling friends or playing games. Only when you really, truly need help." Maya's 8-year-old mind had struggled then to imagine what kind of emergency might require her to use it. Now, as the school bus continued its journey into increasingly unfamiliar territory, she understood. Around her, the atmosphere on the bus had shifted dramatically. The usual morning chatter had been replaced by hushed whispers and nervous glances. Even the middle schoolers, who typically projected an air of teenage confidence, seemed unsettled by the unexpected detour and Mr. Henderson's uncharacteristic behavior. Maya noticed that several of the older students were also checking their phones, probably texting parents or friends about their strange morning commute. Mr. Henderson seemed to sense the growing unrest behind him. His eyes darted to the rearview mirror more frequently now, and Maya caught glimpses of something she had never seen before in his expression: desperation mixed with determination. It was the look of a man who had made a decision he couldn't take back, and the recognition of it made her stomach twist with fear. The bus turned onto a narrow road flanked by high chain-link fences topped with barbed wire. Beyond the fences, Maya could see empty parking lots and buildings with broken windows, their glass teeth catching the weak morning sunlight. This was definitely not a shortcut to anywhere a school bus should be going. When a few more students began to voice their concerns, Mr. Henderson's response was to turn up the radio, drowning out their questions with static-filled music that seemed almost aggressive in its volume. Maya's fingers trembled as she carefully dialed the 3 numbers every child in America learns by heart: 911. The phone felt impossibly large in her small hands, and she had to use both thumbs to press each digit. Her heart hammered against her ribs as she held the phone close to her ear, praying that Mr. Henderson wouldn't notice the quiet electronic sounds it made as it connected to the emergency services. 911. What's your emergency? The voice on the other end was calm, professional, and instantly reassuring. Maya had never called 911 before. In hearing another adult's voice, an adult who wasn't acting strangely or ignoring her concerns, almost made her cry with relief. "I'm on a school bus," Maya whispered, cupping her hand around the phone to muffle her voice. "The driver is taking us the wrong way. We're supposed to go to Riverside Elementary, but we're in the warehouse part of town." The dispatcher's tone immediately became more focused. "What's your name, sweetie?" "Maya Johnson. I'm 8 years old." "Okay, Maya, you're being very brave. Can you tell me what bus you're on? Is there a number on it?" Maya carefully turned to look at the front of the bus, where the bus number was usually displayed. "It says 47. And what's the driver's name?" "Mr. Henderson. He's been our driver for 2 years, but he's acting really weird today. He won't listen when we tell him he's going the wrong way, and he yelled at us to be quiet." The dispatcher was quiet for a moment, and Maya could hear the rapid clicking of computer keys in the background. "Maya, I need you to stay very calm and keep talking to me quietly. Are there other children on the bus with you?" "Yes, lots of them. Maybe 20 or 25 kids from elementary and middle school." "Good. Now, can you see any street signs, or tell me what you see around you?" Maya pressed her face closer to the window, trying to make out details in the industrial landscape. "There are big buildings with broken windows, and lots of fences with wire on top. I saw a sign that said Industrial Boulevard a few minutes ago." She could hear more typing, and then the dispatcher's voice returned with increased urgency. "Maya, we're sending help right now. Police officers are already heading your way. I need you to stay on the phone with me, but try to keep quiet so the driver doesn't know you're calling. Can you do that?" "Yes," Maya breathed, feeling slightly less alone knowing that help was coming. But, as she looked around at her fellow passengers, some as young as 5 years old, others barely into their teens, she wondered if help would arrive in time, and more frighteningly, what Mr. Henderson was planning to do with a bus full of children in the abandoned industrial district of their small town. The bus made another turn, this time onto a street that looked like it hadn't seen regular traffic in years. Maya's fear deepened as she realized they were heading toward the most isolated part of the warehouse district, where even the police might have trouble finding them quickly. The abandoned industrial complex stretched before them like a concrete maze, its towering structures casting the school bus into alternating patches of shadow and weak sunlight. Maya could see rust stains bleeding down the sides of metal buildings and weeds pushing through cracks in the asphalt, reclaiming what had once been a bustling center of commerce. The isolation of their location began to dawn on the older students, and Maya could hear hushed, frightened conversations starting to bubble up, despite Mr. Henderson's earlier warnings to remain quiet. "Maya, are you still there?" The dispatcher's voice came through the phone, barely audible even though Maya held it pressed against her ear. "Yes," she whispered back, glancing nervously toward the front of the bus. Mr. Henderson seemed completely focused on navigating the narrow roads between the industrial buildings, his knuckles still white on the steering wheel, but his driving had become more erratic, more urgent. "The officers are very close now. They're being careful because we don't want to put you or the other children in any more danger than you might already be in. Can you tell me if the bus has stopped yet?" Before Maya could answer, the bus began to slow down. Through the front windshield, she could see that they were approaching a large, windowless building painted in faded blue, with a parking lot surrounded by high fences. The building looked like it had been abandoned for years, with metal doors that were chained shut and graffiti covering much of the lower walls. "He's stopping," Maya whispered urgently into the phone. "We're at a big blue building with chains on the doors." The bus came to a complete stop, and the sudden absence of engine noise made the atmosphere inside even more tense. Maya could hear her own heartbeat, and she noticed that many of the other children had gone completely silent, sensing that something was very wrong with their situation. Mr. Henderson turned around in his seat to face the passengers, and Maya quickly slipped the phone under her leg while keeping the call connected. His face looked different now, haggard and desperate, with deep lines around his eyes that she had never noticed before. When he spoke, his voice was shaky but determined. "I need all of you to listen very carefully," he began, his words carrying across the silent bus. "We're going to wait here for a little while. I want everyone to stay in their seats and keep quiet. No talking, no getting up, no questions." 12-year-old Sarah from 6th grade, who had always been brave and outspoken, raised her hand tentatively. "Mr. Henderson, our parents are going to be worried when we don't show up at school. Maybe we should call them?" "No phones," he said sharply, his eyes scanning the bus with a new alertness that made Maya's stomach clench. "I want to see everyone's phones right now. Put them on the seat in front of you." Maya's blood ran cold. If she gave up her phone now, she would lose contact with the dispatcher, and no one would know exactly where they were. She watched as several students reluctantly placed their phones on the seats in front of them, but she kept hers hidden beneath her leg, praying that Mr. Henderson wouldn't notice her non-compliance in his scan of the bus. "I said everyone," Mr. Henderson repeated, his voice taking on a dangerous edge. He stood up and began walking down the aisle, collecting phones as he went. Maya's mind raced as she watched him get closer to her seat. She could feel the phone's warmth against her leg, and could barely make out the dispatcher's voice still trying to talk to her. When Mr. Henderson reached the row in front of her, Maya made a split-second decision. She slipped the phone quickly into the deepest pocket of her backpack, zipping it closed just as Mr. Henderson's shadow fell across her seat. "Where's your phone, Maya?" he asked, his voice softer, but somehow more threatening than when he had been yelling. "I don't have one," she lied, looking up at him with the most innocent expression she could manage. Her heart was beating so hard she was certain he could hear it, but she kept her voice steady. "My mom says I'm too young for a phone." Mr. Henderson stared at her for a long moment, his eyes searching her face for any sign of deception. Maya forced herself to maintain eye contact, remembering what her father had once told her about telling the truth, that people who were lying usually looked away. She just hoped that the same principle worked in reverse. Finally, he moved on to the next row, confiscating phones from the older students who had them. But Maya noticed that his movements were becoming more agitated, more rushed, and he kept glancing toward the windows as if he expected to see something, or someone, approaching. As he collected the last of the phones, stuffing them into a canvas bag he had pulled from under his driver's seat, Maya heard a sound that made her heart leap with hope, the distant wail of sirens, still far away but getting closer. Mr. Henderson heard it too, and his entire body went rigid. "Stay in your seats," he commanded, his voice now openly panicked. "Don't move. Don't make a sound." Maya reached slowly into her backpack, trying to retrieve her phone without making any noise. She had to maintain contact with the dispatcher, had to let them know that the situation was escalating, and that Mr. Henderson was becoming more desperate by the minute. As her fingers found the phone, she realized that whatever was happening here was far more serious than a simple wrong turn, and that she and her fellow passengers were in real danger. The sirens grew louder, their urgent wailing echoing off the concrete walls of the industrial buildings and filling the air with a sound that was both terrifying and hopeful. Maya managed to retrieve her phone from her backpack with careful, silent movements, her small fingers trembling as she brought it back to her ear. The dispatcher's voice was still there, calm and reassuring despite the chaos. "Maya, can you hear me? We can hear sirens on your end. The police officers are very close now." "Yes," Maya breathed, barely moving her lips. "Mr. Henderson heard them too. He's really scared." Through the bus windows, Maya could see Mr. Henderson pacing back and forth in the parking lot, his hands running through his hair in agitated gestures. He kept looking toward the entrance of the industrial complex, then back at the bus, as if trying to decide what to do next. His behavior had moved beyond strange into something that frightened Maya, more than she had ever been frightened before. The other children on the bus were beginning to cry. Little Emma from kindergarten, who usually sat near the back with her older brother, had started sobbing quietly, and the sound seemed to trigger tears from several of the other younger passengers. The older students were trying to comfort them while managing their own fear, but Maya could see the terror in everyone's eyes. "Maya," the dispatcher continued, "I need you to tell me exactly what the driver is doing right now. He's outside the bus walking around." "He looks really worried about the sirens," Maya whispered, watching as Mr. Henderson pulled something from his jacket pocket. Her breath caught when she realized it was another phone. One he had been hiding. "He has a phone." "He's calling someone." Maya strained to hear what Mr. Henderson was saying, but his voice was too low and the distance too great. What she could see was his increasingly frantic gestures and the way he kept shaking his head, as if whoever he was talking to wasn't giving him the answers he wanted to hear. "The officers are almost there, Maya. When they arrive, I want you to stay exactly where you are, unless an officer tells you otherwise. Don't get up, don't run toward them, just wait. They're trained to handle situations like this safely." "What kind of situation is this?" Maya asked, though part of her wasn't sure she wanted to know the answer. Before the dispatcher could respond, Maya saw something that made her heart nearly stop. 2 police cars had appeared at the entrance to the industrial complex, their red and blue lights flashing, but their sirens now silent. They moved slowly, carefully, clearly trying not to spook Mr. Henderson into doing something dangerous. Mr. Henderson saw them too. He ended his phone call abruptly and ran back toward the bus, his face a mask of panic and desperation. Maya quickly hid the phone again as he climbed the steps and took his position in the driver's seat. "Nobody move," he shouted, his voice breaking with stress. "I mean it. Nobody makes a sound." But it was too late for silence. Several of the younger children were crying openly now, and even some of the older students had tears streaming down their faces. The bus had become a pressure cooker of fear and confusion, with 25 children trapped inside while police cars slowly approached from the distance. Maya watched through the windshield as more police vehicles appeared. Not just cars now, but larger vehicles that she didn't recognize. Men and women in uniform were getting out, but they stayed far away from the bus, communicating with each other through hand signals and radios. "Why won't they come help us?" asked Marcus, the 5th grader who had questioned their route earlier. "Because they don't want to make him do something worse," said Sarah, the 6th grader, who seemed to understand more about the adult world than the rest of them. "They have to be careful." Maya realized that Sarah was right. Whatever Mr. Henderson was planning, whatever had driven him to take a bus full of children to an abandoned industrial complex, the police couldn't just rush in without potentially putting all of their lives at risk. They had to wait, had to be patient, had to trust that the adults outside would find a way to get them out safely. But as Maya watched Mr. Henderson's increasingly erratic behavior and saw more police vehicles arriving, she began to understand that this was no ordinary emergency. This was something that would change all of their lives, something that would be talked about in their small town for years to come. And somehow, her decision to call 911 had put her right in the center of it all. She reached for her phone one more time, knowing that maintaining contact with the outside world might be the most important thing she could do for herself and her fellow passengers. The standoff stretched on for what felt like hours, but was probably only 20 minutes. Maya could see that more police had arrived, so many that the entrance to the industrial complex now looked like a parking lot of patrol cars, unmarked vehicles, and what appeared to be a large command truck with antennas sprouting from its roof. The sight should have been reassuring, but instead it emphasized just how serious their situation had become. "Maya, are you still with me?" The dispatcher's voice came through the phone, which Maya had managed to keep hidden despite the tension. "Yes," she whispered, watching as Mr. Henderson sat rigidly in the driver's seat, staring at the police presence ahead of them. There are so many police cars now. That's good, sweetie. It means we have lots of people working to keep you safe. I need to tell you something important. One of the officers is going to try to talk to your bus driver. They're going to use a loudspeaker. When that happens, I want you to stay very quiet and listen carefully to what they say. As if summoned by the dispatcher's words, a voice suddenly boomed across the industrial complex, amplified and clear despite the distance. This is Sergeant Rodriguez with the Metro Police Department. We're here to help everyone get home safely today. Maya felt Mr. Henderson's entire body tense at the sound of the police officer's voice. His hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly that his knuckles looked like they might break through his skin. We know you have children on that bus, the officer continued, and we know you care about their safety. We'd like to talk to you, work this out so everyone can go home to their families tonight. Mr. Henderson remained silent, but Maya could see his chest rising and falling rapidly, as if he was having trouble breathing. Around her, the other children had gone completely quiet, straining to hear every word from the loudspeaker. We're not here to hurt anyone, Sergeant Rodriguez continued. We just want to understand what's happening and help you work through whatever problems you're facing. Would you be willing to pick up the radio in your bus and talk to us? For a moment, Maya thought Mr. Henderson might actually respond. He looked toward the radio equipment mounted near his seat, and his hand even moved slightly in that direction. But then he seemed to think better of it, shaking his head and turning to look back at the children with an expression that was part desperation and part apology. I'm sorry, he said, his voice breaking. I'm so sorry you kids got mixed up in this. This wasn't supposed to happen like this. His words sent a chill through the bus. Whatever this was, it was clearly something he had planned. Something that involved taking children away from their normal route to school. Maya's mind raced with possibilities, none of them good. The phone pressed against her ear crackled with the dispatcher's voice again. Maya, can you hear what the driver is saying to you kids? He said he's sorry we got mixed up in this, Maya whispered back. He said it wasn't supposed to happen like this. She could hear typing on the other end of the line, and then the dispatcher spoke with increased urgency. Maya, I'm going to need you to be extra brave for me, okay? The officers are going to try something, and I need you to help them by staying very calm and keeping the other children calm too. Before Maya could ask what the officers were planning, she saw movement outside the bus. One police officer, a woman with short brown hair, was walking slowly toward them with her hands raised in the air, showing that she wasn't carrying any weapons. She moved carefully, deliberately, stopping about 50 feet from the bus. My name is Officer Martinez, she called out, her voice carrying clearly through the morning air. I'm a mom too. I have 2 kids, and they ride a school bus just like this one. I know how scared everyone must be right now, and I want to help. Maya watched Mr. Henderson's reaction to this new development. His breathing became even more rapid, and she could see sweat forming on his forehead despite the cool morning air. I don't want to hurt anyone, he called back, his voice shaky but loud enough to be heard outside the bus. I never wanted to hurt anyone. I believe you, Officer Martinez replied, taking a few steps closer. Good people sometimes find themselves in bad situations. Whatever brought you here today, whatever problems you're dealing with, we can work through them together. Maya realized that she was witnessing something extraordinary, a trained police officer trying to save not just the children on the bus, but Mr. Henderson too. The officer wasn't treating him like a monster, even though he had put them all in danger. She was treating him like a person who needed help. Can you tell me your first name? Officer Martinez asked, now only about 30 feet from the bus. Robert? Mr. Henderson replied after a long pause. Bobby. Okay, Bobby, that's a good start. Now I can see you have a lot of scared children on that bus. What do you say we get them somewhere safe while you and I talk about what's really going on? Maya held her breath, waiting for Mr. Henderson's response. Everything seemed to hang in the balance of that moment. Their safety, their future, and maybe even Mr. Henderson's life. She gripped her phone tighter, ready to relay whatever happened next to the dispatcher who would become her lifeline to the outside world. The tension in the air was so thick that Maya felt like she could reach out and touch it. Mr. Henderson, Bobby, sat frozen in his seat, staring at Officer Martinez through the windshield. Maya could see the internal struggle playing out across his face, as if 2 different versions of himself were fighting for control. The children around her were holding their breath, instinctively understanding that they were witnessing a crucial moment. Bobby, Officer Martinez continued, her voice gentle but clear. I can see you're a good man who's been dealing with something difficult. The fact that you apologize to these kids tells me you know this isn't the right way to handle whatever you're going through. Maya's phone crackled softly against her ear, and the dispatcher's voice came through barely above a whisper. "Maya, you're doing amazingly well. Just keep listening and stay calm." Through the bus window, Maya could see that Officer Martinez had moved close enough that she was now standing just outside the bus door. She wasn't threatening or aggressive. Instead, she looked like someone who genuinely wanted to help, like a teacher or a counselor who had come to talk through a problem. "I lost my job," Bobby suddenly said, his voice carrying across the silence. 3 weeks ago. 22 years driving buses for this district, and they let me go because of budget cuts. I got a house, I got bills, His voice trailed off, and Maya could see his shoulders shaking. "That's really hard, Bobby," Officer Martinez replied with genuine sympathy. "Losing a job after 22 years, that would be devastating for anyone. You've been taking care of these kids all this time, being responsible for their safety every single day. That's important work." Maya began to understand that Mr. Henderson wasn't a bad person who had decided to hurt children. He was someone who was hurting himself, someone whose world had fallen apart, and who had made a terrible decision in his desperation. The realization made her feel scared in a different way, not just for her own safety, but for what might happen to the man she had known as a kind bus driver for 2 years. "The thing is," Bobby continued, "I found out they're not just cutting drivers. They're selling off routes to a private company. The new company offered me a job, but for half the pay and no benefits. How am I supposed to take care of my wife with that? She's been sick, real sick, and the medical bills." Officer Martinez nodded understandingly. "It sounds like you've been carrying a lot of stress, Bobby. Medical bills, job loss. That's enough to overwhelm anyone. But taking these kids wasn't going to solve those problems, was it?" "I know," Bobby said, his voice breaking completely now. "I know it was stupid. I thought if I could make the district understand what they were losing, show them that I'm the one who keeps these kids safe every day. I thought maybe—" Maya's heart broke a little as she listened to Mr. Henderson's explanation. He hadn't kidnapped them because he wanted to hurt them. He had taken them because he was desperate to keep his job, to show everyone how important he was to the children's safety. It was wrong and frightening, but it wasn't evil. "Maya," the dispatcher's voice came through the phone again. "Can you tell me what's happening now?" "Officer Martinez is talking to Mr. Henderson," Maya whispered back. "He lost his job, and his wife is sick. I think he's crying." Around her on the bus, Maya could see that several of the older students had begun to understand the situation too. Sarah, the 6th grader, had tears in her eyes, and Marcus was staring at Mr. Henderson with a mixture of fear and sadness. "Bobby," Officer Martinez said, "I can see how much you care about these kids. In 22 years of driving, you've probably never had a single safety incident, have you?" "Never," Bobby replied, wiping his eyes with his sleeve. "Not once. I've always brought them home safe." "And that's exactly what we're going to do today, too," the officer said firmly. "We're going to make sure every single one of these children gets home safely to their families. But first, I need you to open this door and let me come up so we can talk face to face." Maya felt the entire bus hold its breath. This was the moment that would determine whether they were going home safely or whether the situation would spiral into something even more dangerous. She watched as Bobby's hand moved toward the lever that would open the bus door, hesitated, then moved away again. "What happens to me after?" Bobby asked, his voice barely audible. "What happens is that you get the help you need," Officer Martinez replied. "You get connected with people who understand job loss and medical bills and the kind of stress that makes good people make bad decisions. You get a chance to work through this instead of carrying it all alone." Maya realized she was witnessing something extraordinary, not just a police standoff, but a moment of genuine human connection. Officer Martinez wasn't just trying to end a dangerous situation. She was trying to save everyone involved, including the man who had put them all at risk. The bus door opened with a mechanical hiss that seemed to echo across the entire industrial complex. Officer Martinez climbed the steps of the school bus slowly, her movements deliberate and non-threatening. Maya could see her more clearly now. She was younger than Maya had expected, probably in her 30s, with kind eyes and a calm demeanor that seemed to fill the bus with a sense of safety. As she reached the top of the steps, she kept her hands visible and spoke in the same gentle tone she had used outside. "Thank you, Bobby," she said, taking a seat across the aisle from him but close enough to talk quietly. That took courage. Maya noticed that Officer Martinez positioned herself where she could see all the children on the bus while still focusing primarily on Mr. Henderson. It was clear she had been trained for situations like this, but Maya could also see genuine care in her expression as she looked at the frightened faces around her. Kids, Officer Martinez said, turning slightly to address the passengers. "My name is Officer Martinez, and I'm here to make sure everyone gets home safely today. I know this has been really scary, but you've all been incredibly brave." Her words seemed to break some of the tension on the bus. A few of the younger children stopped crying, and Maya could see relief beginning to replace the stark fear on many faces. Even so, everyone remained perfectly still, as if afraid that any movement might shatter this fragile moment of safety. "Bobby," Officer Martinez continued, "I want you to know that there are people outside who want to help you with the problems you've been facing. Job counselors, people who understand medical bills and insurance issues. You don't have to handle all of this alone anymore." Maya could see Mr. Henderson nodding, tears still streaming down his face. "I never wanted to scare them," he said, gesturing toward the children. "These kids, they're good kids. I've watched some of them grow up, seen them through kindergarten, first grade, second grade." "I know," Officer Martinez replied. "And they've come to trust you over the years. That's why this is so hard for everyone. But trust can be rebuilt, Bobby. Mistakes can be forgiven, especially when someone is willing to make things right." Maya felt her phone vibrate against her ear, and the dispatcher's voice came through quietly. "Maya, you're doing great. The officers outside are going to start moving closer now, but everything is going to be fine." Through the windows, Maya could see that the police presence was indeed changing. More officers were moving closer to the bus, but they weren't rushing or being aggressive. Instead, they seemed to be positioning themselves to help with whatever came next. "Bobby," Officer Martinez said, "I'm going to ask you to do something that might feel scary, but I promise it's going to make everything better for you and for these kids. I want you to turn off the bus engine and give me the keys." Maya held her breath. This was another crucial moment, one that would determine whether Mr. Henderson was truly ready to end this situation safely. After a long pause, Bobby reached over and turned the key. The engine died with a final rumble, leaving the bus in an almost eerie quiet. Then, slowly, he removed the keys from the ignition and handed them to Officer Martinez. "Thank you," she said, accepting the keys with obvious relief. "Now here's what's going to happen. We're going to get all these children off the bus and reunited with their families. They're going to go home and tell their parents about how brave they were today and how they handled a difficult situation with incredible maturity." She turned to look at the children again. "And that's exactly what you did. Every single one of you should be proud of how you handled today." Maya felt a warmth spread through her chest at Officer Martinez's words. She had been brave, hadn't she? She had called for help when no one else could, and she had helped save not just herself, but everyone on the bus. "What about Mr. Henderson?" asked Sarah, the sixth grader who had been watching the interaction with intense focus. Officer Martinez looked at Bobby, then back at Sarah. "Mr. Henderson is going to get help with his problems, and he's going to have a chance to make things right. Sometimes adults make mistakes too, just like kids do, and the important thing is learning from them and doing better next time." Maya could see that Mr. Henderson was looking at each of the children on the bus as if trying to memorize their faces, or perhaps apologize to each of them individually without words. When his eyes met hers, she saw something that surprised her: gratitude. He seemed to understand that her phone call had ultimately helped him too, by bringing people who could help him instead of letting his desperation drive him to make even worse decisions. "Okay, everyone," Officer Martinez announced, standing up carefully. "We're going to leave the bus now, one row at a time, starting from the front. When you get outside, there are officers who will help you find your parents and get you home safely." Maya realized that her ordeal was almost over, but she also understood that this experience would stay with her forever. She had learned something important about courage, about helping others, and about the complicated nature of good and bad in the adult world. As the first row of students began to file off the bus, Maya reached into her backpack one final time to retrieve her phone. The dispatcher was still there, patient and reassuring. "Maya, you did something incredible today," the dispatcher said. "You helped save 25 children and one very troubled adult. You should be very proud of yourself." "Thank you for staying with me," Maya whispered back. "I was really scared." "You were scared, but you were brave anyway. That's what real courage is." Maya ended the call and prepared to leave the bus that had become the setting for the most frightening and transformative morning of her young life. As she stood up, she looked back at Mr. Henderson one more time. He was sitting quietly with Officer Martinez, no longer the desperate, frightening man he had been just minutes earlier, but someone who looked tired and sad and in need of the help he was finally going to receive. 3 months later, Maya Johnson sat in the same spot on school bus number 47, watching the familiar houses of her neighborhood pass by the window. The new driver, Mrs. Patterson, was cheerful and reliable, always taking the correct route to Riverside Elementary and greeting each child with a warm smile. But Maya found herself thinking about Mr. Henderson more often than she expected. The aftermath of that Tuesday morning had been overwhelming. News reporters had wanted to interview her, calling her a young hero, and asking how it felt to save so many people. Her parents had been proud but protective, limiting her exposure to the media and focusing instead on helping her process what had happened. Maya had attended several sessions with the school counselor, talking through her feelings about the incident, and learning that it was normal to feel complicated emotions about someone who had both frightened her and needed help. The most surprising development had come just 2 weeks after the incident. Maya's mother had received a phone call from Mr. Henderson himself. He was in a treatment program for depression and anxiety, getting help with his financial problems, and working through the complicated feelings that had led to his desperate decision. He had asked if he could write Maya a letter, thanking her for her courage and explaining how her phone call had actually saved his life, as well as the lives of the children on the bus. The letter, which Maya kept in her desk drawer at home, was handwritten on simple notebook paper. In it, Mr. Henderson explained that he had been planning something much worse than just taking the children to the warehouse district. In his desperation, he had been considering driving the bus off a bridge, thinking that if he couldn't solve his problems, at least he wouldn't have to face the shame of losing everything. But Maya's phone call had brought people who were trained to help him see other options, people who understood that his problems were solvable and that his life had value. "I want you to know," he had written, "that your courage didn't just save 24 other children that day, it saved me too. It brought me help when I couldn't help myself, and it showed me that there are people in this world who care about finding solutions instead of just giving up." Maya had asked her mother to help her write a letter back. In it, she told Mr. Henderson that she hoped he was feeling better and that she was glad he was getting help. She also told him that she had learned something important that day, that sometimes being brave meant asking for help, even when you were scared, and that good people could make bad decisions when they were hurting. The exchange of letters had led to something unexpected. Mr. Henderson had started speaking at schools about mental health, depression, and the importance of asking for help when life becomes overwhelming. He talked about how financial stress and health worries had made him feel trapped, and how he had almost made the worst decision of his life because he felt like he had no other options. Maya had attended one of his presentations at the community center, sitting in the back with her parents. She was amazed to see how different he looked, healthier, calmer, and somehow younger than he had appeared during those frightening minutes on the bus. When he told the audience about a brave 8-year-old girl who made a phone call that changed everything, Maya felt a complex mixture of pride and humility. After the presentation, Mr. Henderson had approached Maya and her family. The conversation was awkward at first. How do you talk to someone who once terrified you, but who you also helped save? But it ended with something Maya hadn't expected. Mr. Henderson had asked if he could give her a hug, and after looking to her parents for permission, Maya had said yes. "Thank you," he had whispered as he hugged her gently. "Thank you for seeing that I needed help, instead of just seeing someone to be afraid of." Now, as Maya rode the bus to school on another ordinary Tuesday morning, she thought about the lessons she had learned from that extraordinary day. She had learned that courage wasn't about not being scared. It was about doing the right thing, even when you were terrified. She had learned that adults didn't always have all the answers, and that sometimes they needed help just as much as children did. Most importantly, she had learned that her voice mattered, that even an 8-year-old could make a difference when she was willing to speak up. The bus pulled into the school parking lot, and Maya gathered her butterfly backpack and prepared for another day of 3rd grade. As she walked toward the school building, she noticed a group of kindergartners who looked nervous about their first bus ride. Maya remembered being that age, remembered how big and scary the world could seem. She walked over to them with a smile. "The bus is really safe," she told them. "And if anything ever feels wrong, you can always ask for help. There are always people ready to help, if you're brave enough to ask." One of the little girls looked up at Maya with wide eyes. "How do you know?" Maya thought about her answer for a moment, then smiled. Because I learned it from experience. And because I learned that being brave doesn't mean you're not scared. It means you do the right thing anyway. As Maya walked into Riverside Elementary, she carried with her the knowledge that she had played a part in a story that had changed multiple lives, her own, her fellow passengers, and even Mr. Henderson's. The experience had taught her that the world was more complicated than she had understood at 8 years old, but also more hopeful. People could change, situations could improve, and sometimes the smallest voice could make the biggest difference. The butterfly backpack bounced gently against her shoulders as she headed to her classroom, ready for whatever challenges the day might bring. Maya Johnson had learned that she was braver than she knew, and that lesson would stay with her for the rest of her life. What moment in this story resonated with you the most? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and if you enjoyed this narrative, please subscribe to my channel. Your support means the world to me and helps keep these stories coming.